The Northern Irish Parliament buildings, commonly known as Stormont. Its government collapsed in January. Paul Faith Agents France Press, Getty Images Belfast, Northern Ireland. The Northern Ireland Assembly's palatial building in Stormont, in the hills that overlook Belfast, is an eerie place these days. This time last year, its grand lobby bustled with lawmakers, lobbyists and civil servants, but this week it is empty and lifeless. Further inside, a few tourists swarmed the blue seats of the debating chamber, rather than the 90 lawmakers elected to work there. Even the microphones had been removed. "It's a total ghost town," said Claire Hanna, one of those lawmakers. "It's dead, and so it has been since as long ago as January, when Northern Ireland's governing coalition collapsed. That created a power vacuum at Stormont that has still not been filled, paralysing the region's already pinched institutions and threatening a 1998 peace deal that largely ended 3 decades of fighting between nationalist and unionist factions. Since that deal, known as the Good Friday Agreement, Northern Ireland has been run mostly by a devolved regional government that must, in effect, be led by a coalition between the region's largest nationalist party and its largest unionist counterpart. But in January this delicate arrangement was upended when Sinn Féin, which hopes for a united Ireland one day, withdrew from a coalition with the Democratic Unionist Party, which wants Northern Ireland to remain part of the United Kingdom. The government stopped working and the Assembly stopped meeting. A major overhaul of the region's ailing health system was postponed, and all long-term decisions about government spending were put on hold. "This is a more profound crisis than we've had at other times in the last 20 years, said Stephen Farry, the deputy leader of the Alliance Party, a centrist group that does not identify as either nationalist or unionist. The government was shaken again this weekend, with the news that Gerry Adams would stand down as president of Sinn Féin. His departure at the end of the year may help the party achieve its goal of becoming a palatable coalition partner in the Irish government, but for Northern Ireland the implications are less clear. Optimists have expressed hopes that his absence could give the political parties in Belfast more room for manoeuvre. But combined with the death in March of Mr Adams's former colleague, Martin McGuinness, it deprives the government of established leaders who are willing or able to make compromises on both sides of the sectarian divide. The Assembly has previously been suspended, most memorably between 2002 and 2007. But then there was the sense that this was a blip and the problems would be overcome, Mr Farry said. Gerry Adams addressing the annual Sinn Féin party conference in Dublin on Saturday. He announced this weekend that he planned to step down as the party's leader. Aidan Crawley, European press photo agency. "This crisis has a different feel to it," he added. "There's a much more profound question over the direction of travel and whether power sharing is sustainable. And that begs the question, what happens next in the short term? Civil servants have been left in charge of the day-to-day management of the region. But if the impasse continues, many fear that decisions will be made by ministers in London, a system known as direct rule that the 1998 agreement was meant to end. In the absence of a Northern Irish finance minister, the British government has already made the first step toward direct rule, passing an interim budget for Northern Ireland on Monday to ensure that salaries can be paid until March. The spectre of Brexit compounds the crisis when the United Kingdom leaves the European Union. Border controls may be reintroduced between Northern and Southern Ireland for the first time since the Good Friday Agreement was introduced. Some now question whether the agreement has in essence collapsed, and fear, if not a return to anything like a full-blown conflict, then at least a rise in sporadic acts of paramilitary intimidation. "I don't mean to be dramatic or anything, but I do think the Good Friday Agreement is effectively dead," said Ms Hanna, who represents the Social Democratic and Labour Party, Sinn Féin's main nationalist rival. "I don't think there's any real support for violence, but you can see how quickly things can unravel," she added. "It's very bleak, and it is something to worry about. A stagnated state for now. Civil servants are keeping the machinery of the state in motion. But as unelected employees, they must simply apply the decisions made by the elected government during the last financial year, meaning that they can neither react to changing circumstances nor increase their budgets in line with inflation. This has led to stasis and, in some cases, cuts to jobs and services. In one high-profile case, officials were forced to scrap an intensive support program for around 1,000 of the region's most vulnerable children and teenagers, even though the program had led to a significant drop in antisocial behavior and a rise in school attendance. These children were the first victims of this political impasse, said Charlie Mack, the chief executive of Extern, the charity that ran the program on the government's behalf. Which is disgraceful. The health system has also been affected. With the longest wait times in the United Kingdom, the sector had been due for a major overhaul this year, but that has been on hold since the start of the crisis, said Janice Smith, the Northern Ireland director at the Royal College of Nursing, the world's largest nursing union. It cannot happen until we get a minister, she said. Across the region's charitable sector, which is significantly dependent on state funding, charities have become wary of starting new projects or hiring staff, making them less able to respond to social problems that require new strategies. The Democratic Unionist Party leader, Arlene Foster, and Deputy Leader, Nigel Dodds, at a news conference at Stormont Castle in June. Charles McQuillan Getty Images. There's been a stagnation, said Seamus McAlevey, the chief executive of Northern Ireland Council for Voluntary Action, a group that represents more than 1,000 non-governmental organisations. Treading water is probably a fairly good description. The blame game. Yet these administrative challenges have not yet encouraged politicians to reach a settlement. In fact, the differences have increased as the year has developed. When they left the coalition in January, Sinn Féin originally intended to force the resignation of the DUP leader, Arlene Foster, who was accused of corruption. But after Ms Foster refused to step down, Sinn Féin expanded its demands, calling on the DUP to agree to give the Irish language the same legal status as English and to legalise same-sex marriage. In Scotland and Wales, the Scottish and Welsh languages already have an equal legal footing with English, and same-sex marriage has been permitted in the rest of the United Kingdom since 2014. Both sides have been accused of not being truly invested in a compromise. After the Conservative Party lost its majority this summer in the National Parliament in Westminster, it turned to the DUP's small group of national lawmakers to ensure that it remained in power. And there are now suspicions that the Westminster deal has made them less interested in Stormont politics, said Cillian McGrattan, a politics professor at Ulster University. I think they have a view that if they're going to get things done, they're going to get them done in Westminster. The DUP dismisses this argument and says that in fact, it is Sinn Féin that has ulterior motives for maintaining the standoff. Since Sinn Féin also operates in the Republic of Ireland, it fears that it will harm its reputation among left-wing voters in Dublin if it is forced to pursue neoliberal policies while in government in Belfast, said Sammy Wilson, a DUP lawmaker. Sinn Féin scoffs at this. Why would it not be great for Sinn Féin to be running things? Asked Máirtín Ó Muilleoir, the Sinn Féin finance minister at the time of the coalition's collapse. The months I spent as finance minister burnished and enhanced Sinn Féin's reputation for getting things done, a new paradigm. As the standoff drags on, and polarisation increases, people find it harder to envisage Northern Ireland as an autonomous entity. We're back to this binary situation where people either see it as a problematic part of the UK or as a part of United Ireland, said Graham Walker, a politics professor at Queen's University, Belfast. To resolve the crisis in the long term, some suggest reshaping the Good Friday Agreement to allow for other kinds of coalitions, instead of a mandatory partnership between the region's two largest nationalist and unionist factions. Others predict a referendum on Irish reunification within a decade, arguing that the current dysfunction, coupled with the fallout from Brexit, may encourage moderate nationalists to see a united Ireland as a more urgent priority than they did previously. Whereas Stormont was once seen as a symbol of hope and progress, citizens of all backgrounds now see it as an embarrassment. Ricky Routledge, the head of a homeless charity who meets lawmakers at Stormont as part of her work, said she once felt a sense of civic pride on her visits there. Now, I go up to Stormont and it's this great big echoey, empty, impotent place, Ms Routledge said. And it's heartbreaking.